Hello, and welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today, our episode is for all those people getting ready to start law school who are wondering, what should I be doing to get ready? Do I have to ruin my whole summer, or do I need to do nothing? We've got the answers. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan, that's me, and Lee Burgess. Our goal is to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together, we're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, Bar Exam Toolbox, the Catapult Career Conference, and the Trebuchet Legal Careers site. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. With that, let's get started.
Welcome back. Today we're talking about what incoming law students should be doing or thinking about this summer to get ready. If you're heading to law school soon, this episode is for you. But first off, let's just get this out of the way. Alison, are you going to flunk out of law school if you ignore our advice and do nothing at all?
Well, I mean, I guess it's possible, but I tend to doubt it. I mean, the reality is people need different levels of preparation to feel prepared for a new experience. And I think your goal going into law school should be to be as prepared as possible in every sense. So, prepared for the academics, prepared for life, prepared emotionally, prepared physically. And some people, you might want to read some books and get ready. And other people, you might just want to sit on the beach, and that's totally fine. I mean, I think it probably wouldn't kill you to do something. This is a huge investment of time and money, and you want to make sure you're ready for it. But I don't think you need to go overboard. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree. And I think everybody kind of comes to the law school experience with a different set of skills. And, whether or not you feel prepared is such a personal thing. And, for me, I was working right before law school. So although I did take a vacation and I went to Costa Rica that summer, I pretty much worked until a couple of weeks before law school because I was trying to save money.
No, I did the same. I mean,
yeah.
Luckily, when I gave notice, my boss was crazy and tried to fire me, so I didn't actually have to work those last 2 weeks. It really helped. I was moving across the country, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, that the fact that I ended up not having to work the last 2 weeks that I was planning on working was really probably the only thing that allowed me to show up in any sort of coherent, stable, calm form, because I had definitely underestimated how long it was going to take to move my entire life 3,000 miles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think no matter what, you just have to look at your situation and, make a list of the things that you need to do that will help you feel prepared. Because I don't think you want to be running into law school class harried and freaked out by a change of living situation, or have no idea what's happening, or have not done the reading before class, and things like that.
No, I mean, one of my roommates, she was a first year when I was a second year, and she got in, I think, sort of admitted or something at the last minute and didn't have housing. And she was literally couch surfing in New York for the first several weeks of class. And then one day it kind of got dumped on our doorstep. And, this housing people had just called her and been like, hey, you have a place to live now. And, that was really chaotic for her. Not to say there's anything she necessarily could have done in that situation to make it better, but it was definitely a very chaotic introduction to school.
Yeah. And law school and a change of career, especially if you're doing that, can be stressful enough. You don't need to add an unnecessary stress if it can be planned for.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, you don't need to go overboard. I mean, some books will tell you that you need to sort of get and pre-read entire supplements for every possible class that could maybe be taught at your school, whether you're going to take it or not take it. I mean, frankly, that's a little absurd, I think.
Yeah.
But again, if you know that that's something that's going to make you feel better, I don't think it's necessarily going to be that useful. But if you want to do it, go for it.
Go for it. All right. So if people are wondering, what are these lists that we're talking about? This personal list of things you should consider or try and get done before law school. Why don't we run down some of the things that we think you should maybe think about? So let's just start with life. Because I think getting your life set up is one of the most important things you can do before law school.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of those where it depends a lot on your personal situation, how soon you can do this. I mean, you definitely don't want to wait too long on any of these, but at the same time, if you're listening to this episode when it comes out in April and you're not starting school until August, you might not be able to figure out some of this stuff today. but that doesn't mean that you don't want to be thinking about it. So, I mean, the biggest one for me is just the most obvious. Where are you going to live?
Yeah. That's a big one.
And along those lines, like, are you going to have roommates? Are you going to live by yourself? You know, I mean, the reality is a lot of schools are in places with really high housing costs these days.
Yep.
And really tight rental markets. So, you know, and maybe your school provides housing, and that's awesome if they do, probably. But, you know, if you're on your own in a place like San Francisco and you're like, hey, I'm going to, you know, whatever school and I've got to find a place to live, that's going to be tough.
It is, especially if you're relocating, because, you know, house hunting, it used to be that you could just roll into a city over a weekend, you know, see some places and figure it out. And some markets, I think San Francisco is one of them, it's really not possible to do that. You know,
I mean, honestly, like, I tried to do that when I went to grad school at Berkeley. I had no idea. I was like, oh, I'm living in LA. I'll drive up for the weekend. I'll find a nice place to stay and I'll go home in like March. And I was starting in, you know, whatever it was, August. It was a nightmare. Mm-hmm. It was like, it was simply not possible. Like, I had a totally unrealistic idea about what the rental market was like. And as a result, ended up having to live in an undergraduate student co-op my first semester with like 200 people. I mean, it was unbelievably horrible. And you just don't want to be doing that.
No, you know, you really don't. Like, if it's avoidable, you definitely don't want to be doing that. So I think it's really important to think ahead, you know, what can you afford? What neighborhoods do you want to live in? I think that's something else that happens when you move to a different city is you can start spending a lot of time on Craigslist, but if you don't know what neighborhoods are, you know, good or not as good or safe or not as safe, depending on what you define as safe and not as safe.
Well, or like what your commute options are. Mm-hmm. You know, do you have public transit? Are you going to have to drive? House parking?
Yep.
You know, these are all things that you gotta get some like on the ground information about, ideally.
Yeah, for sure. And if you have friends that live in the cities, you know, start talking to them, see if you can go visit, spend some time walking around. Every time I move to a new place, we always do the walking around at night test, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Because it can look really different during the daytime.
Exactly. And it's like, would I feel comfortable coming home by myself, you know?
Yeah, or walking, you know, from like the nearest public transit stop to the place you're thinking of living at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, because you're going to be doing that.
Yeah, on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, you know, it's like I live near 16th and Mission BART, and I don't really feel that comfortable walking there at night.
It's not my favorite BART stop myself.
Yeah, like, you know, I'd do it, but it wouldn't be my first choice.
Right, Exactly. So these are things that you definitely want to consider. And if you are relocating to a new city and it is possible to spend some time there, I would just do that so you feel a bit more comfortable. You know, other things that you want to think about is like, what are you going to do for food? Are you going to live near a grocery store? You know, what's your food budget? Do you want to live near takeout options? When I was in law school, I lived in a part of San Francisco that has really great, cheap ethnic food. And I lived off great, cheap ethnic food during law school. You know, and that was actually one of the things that I was excited about that neighborhood is I could, you know, walk by a bunch of places where I could quickly grab food because I'm not a big cook. So,
well, and you're just not going to have a lot of time to do cooking.
Yeah.
And, you know, now you think like, oh, well, if I'm in a major city, I can just Instacart everything. It's like, that gets expensive at school. You know? Like,
it does.
You're not a working professional at this point. That's who that's designed for.
That's true. But I will say I am obsessed with Instacart myself.
Yeah, see, for you, it makes sense. But for me, I'm like, I live 3 blocks from like the place they're delivering from. I so I'll just go to the grocery, right?
I know. It's very true. All right. So what about other life things like where you might work out? Some schools have gyms. My law school had a really nice gym that you could get a membership to, but you know, you probably want to take care of yourself and either have a yoga studio if that's what you do, or CrossFit gym if that's what you do. So you want to do some research so you have these resources in place before you start school.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it just makes sense if you're choosing between different places to live to really think about your creature comforts. You know, it might seem absurd to be like, well, I'm going to move here because there's a nearby yoga studio. But if that's something you like to do, that's going to improve your quality of life. You're going to be more likely to go. And the same thing, you know, are you in a religious organization? You know, is there a relevant house of worship nearby? Mm-hmm. You know, how are you going to get there? That sort of thing. I mean, I think the other like really major issue in terms of financially and just practically is, are you going to need a car?
Yeah, I think that that's very true. because cars can become huge headaches if you really don't need them.
Right.
But if you do need them,
if you do need them, it could be a headache if it's not reliable.
Exactly. And depending on what city you are planning on locating yourself or where in that city, parking is a huge problem. And
oh God, and expensive
parking tickets. I know, exactly. I did get my car towed once in law school from a McDonald's parking lot, and that was unfortunate.
I got mine towed in Berkeley for a football game.
Yeah, and it had our my friend and I had our laptop bags in the trunk.
Oh God.
And it was not very far out from final exams, and we were both losing our minds when we walked back and realized like my car was gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen.
No. So everything was fine, but still, we were both like freaking out.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you have a car and you need to rely on it, you need to make sure that car is reliable. You know, we hear a lot of stories about people who sort of start this downward spiral midway through the first semester because like, well, my car broke down and then I couldn't get to class and then I stopped going, and then it's like that needs to not happen.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's like redundancy and like, are there people you can carpool with? Is there some other transit option? You know, a lot of places in the country, it's really difficult if you can't drive.
It's very true. The other thing to think about, I think we mentioned it a little bit with public transit, is if you're going to be a commuter student, make sure you really appreciate what that's going to be like. Because I think I had some friends who commuted into San Francisco for a variety of reasons, and the hours spent commuting really started to weigh on them. You know, because your days can get very long in law school. And then if you spend another hour each way in the car or on the train, some people don't mind commuting. I even saw an article, I think it was on the New York Times or in the Atlantic, about how some people actually relish the commute.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
But I am not one of those people myself. But if you're not one of those people, you have to really make sure that that's not going to make life even harder. If that's the situation you're in, then it's the situation you're in. But if you have choices you can make sure you're just thoughtful about those choices.
Well, and some of it depends on the time of day. Like, I don't mind, you know, when I was living in New York for law school, I didn't have to commute daily. But, you know, if I had to commute someplace like a job or something, it was okay if it was off hours. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking, because then you put on your iPhone or your iPad or whatever, your music, basically. Put in your headphones, you know, you get out your book or your magazine and you read for half an hour or 45 minutes and you get to the other end. But if you're dealing with like rush hour commute hours, totally different scenario. Like, you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, I think that's true. All right. So getting to school, big deal. I would spend some time
getting there reliably, getting there at the time of day you need to be there. Just things about like, well, if you're going to be on campus all day and you're commuting, where are you going to eat? Or are you going to bring stuff with you? You know, these are the things that it might seem silly to think about now, but you're not going to have time to think about them, you know, the third week of class when suddenly you realize you've been eating nothing but pizza for 3 weeks.
Yeah. And actually, that is something I didn't really plan for in law school when I got there, was the fact that it was kind of like high school. Like, I needed to bring a lunch. Sometimes I would actually have to bring lunch and dinner. If I was at school, if I had a night class or something, I would end up being at school the entire day, and you could only eat so many noodle bowls or whatever we had in the we had this little shop as part of our law school that did not have great food options. And then you realize you're spending $10 or $15 on this noodle bowl that was awful and made you feel bad. But I mean, you need to really think about that. And so planning the fact that I had to bring multiple meals with me to school every day was like an additional level of planning I had not prepared for.
Well, and a lot of people don't know how to cook.
Yeah.
You know, like, one thing you might want to do this summer, if you know that like you literally don't know how to boil pasta, is you might actually want to spend some time like coming up with some recipes and really learning how to cook basic stuff so that you can prepare food for yourself and keep yourself alive.
I think actually one of our tutors wrote a great blog post that we'll put in the show notes about his favorite recipes with the slow cooker and how kind of the slow cooker changed his life. Yes, because he was able to kind of cook. And I am a big slow cooker fan myself, but you can cook a lot of food and it's very low maintenance. And part of that is having to plan ahead or cook on the weekends so you have, you know, multiple meals. It can get a little boring, but it's definitely better than eating pizza or takeout every single meal.
Yeah, I mean, any of these sort of like life tasks that you would think that grown-ups should know how to do by now, but like a lot of people don't know how to do laundry. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, okay, maybe you can send your laundry out, but like you probably, you might want to go home and ask your parents, like, hey, can you show me how you do laundry? Because I really need to know how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds incredible, but, like you can't just buy new clothes all the time.
No. And I think actually that leads to another point, which is if you haven't sat down and really worked on your budget.
Yeah.
I think that is something to do over the summer. How much money are you getting from financial aid, or if you still have, savings or whatever you're living off of, take some time to really think about how your lifestyle either is going to change or not change. Because I know for me, I was a working professional and you were too before law school. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, things have to roll back.
Yeah, suddenly it's not like, oh, well, no big deal. Like, I'll just take a taxi to go out to this fancy dinner because I feel like good. And then we'll go to like, a good movie and then like go to a bar. It's suddenly like, oh, we'll spend like $5 at happy hour buying drinks.
Right. Exactly. So I think, with all of this stuff about, you need to have a budget before you find a place to live. You need to have a budget before you make decisions about your car. You need to figure out your budget so you can think about food, all of that kind of stuff. It really goes back to sitting down maybe with an Excel spreadsheet and trying to run these numbers. I hate doing stuff like that. I've always have. But anytime you don't do it, there are consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. On this note, what about things people really need to buy? I know, it's like really tempting to be like, okay, I've got to buy all this perfect stuff, so I'll be a perfect law student. Like, what's really critical?
I think less than you think. And I think there's something about our culture. I noticed this when I had a baby, that we love to just buy stuff for milestones, And I totally found this out when you were registering for a baby shower, because our friends bought all sorts of stuff that I didn't even know if I would need. And then sometimes I really didn't need.
Or sometimes you're like, I don't even know what this is.
Or I don't know what this is, and like my favorite gifts really came from mom friends who kind of put together gifts and been like, this is my favorite of this that I used. And I was like, that's awesome. Thank you. They're like, this is what saved me. But yeah, you're just on Amazon or whatever, making some crazy registry with all these details of stuff that sometimes you don't need for like 2 years. That was the other thing. Oh, you should buy this car seat you're not going to need for another couple of years. No, I don't want to store that in my garage. Like, I'll buy that car seat when we need it.
Speaking of, it's really too bad there aren't registries for like, I'm starting law school.
I know. That would be good. Well, I guess you could have an Amazon wish list.
Yeah, that's true.
Which maybe would be, if you have some maybe birthdays or family holidays or something like that leading up to law school, maybe an Amazon wish list is a good idea to share with your family about the things you really need. So leaving my rant about how much junk culture you can collect during you're planning on having a child. When you're in law school, I think you want to set up your home to be comfortable. So, sleep is pretty important in law school. So it's pretty important to have a decent bed.
Yeah, but the reality is you might not end up having to buy that bed. I think I lived in Columbia housing, and I'm pretty sure they gave you a bed. I'm not sure if it was the most comfortable bed ever. I think some people replaced it, but I'm pretty sure I just slept in it.
Yeah. So if you need one, though, it's a good thing to budget for if you're going to move to a new place that you need a bed. And then you're going to probably just need the basics of technology, but I don't think you need to go and buy, a whole new set of technology. Of course, you're going to need some sort of reliable computer, and you'll probably need some sort of printer. A scanner might be nice, but now with your phone, I don't know if you really need a scanner anymore.
Yeah, I think I would probably have a printer. I think a scanner is like a nice to have item, but I don't think it's totally critical.
I think with computers, one thing that people forget is they think that they need a brand new computer to start law school.
Yeah.
I would actually say if you're planning on using your computer for the bar, there's nothing wrong with like waiting until maybe your second year or so to get a new computer, because what you don't want is an older computer for the bar.
Right. And you want to make sure too that if you're going to use it on the bar or even on law school exams, that is a computer that will work with the exam software that you're using.
Yes. Because that does not go well when exam software crashes. Other podcasts on disasters.
Many podcasts on exam soft crashing. Or just go and Google ExamSoft bar exam and you'll find pretty much everything you need to know.
Exactly.
I think they've gotten better about that now. I think it works with more different types of computers. But, if you are like a technology geek and you want to go and buy a Linux box, it's like, well, am I going to be able to use that on my exams? Not saying you're not, but you want to confirm that before you go out and spend several $1,000s.
Exactly. So I think the important thing is you need a computer that is reliable, that will work with the software. You need a laptop. It doesn't have to be like the brand new sparkly laptop. It just needs to be like a working laptop.
And I think more and more as more stuff goes into the cloud, it means you actually need less processing power on your actual laptop.
Great technology tip from somebody who understands more about that than I do.
Yeah, basically you don't need to go out and buy like a really high performance machine if you're going to be storing everything in Dropbox and like maybe using Google Docs or something. Like it's not on your machine anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what about other stuff? I guess you need to probably have some nice clothes to look like a lawyer or a law student when you go out to networking events or interviews.
Yeah, I think at least at a minimum, like 1 or 2 outfits that you can look presentable in. Probably if you need to do an interview, we've talked about this before, but you need at least 1 interview outfit. I don't think you need to go crazy on this. You don't need to dress up every day of school. Like people will basically be rolling in their pajamas. Query whether that's a great idea, but like basically nice-ish casual clothes will get you through most of law school. But I think it does make sense to make sure you have at least one set of like, okay, I could go out with professional people and feel comfortable in this outfits.
Yeah, I agree. It's part of playing the part and kind of
and if you're coming straight out of undergrad, like you might not have that. So,
that's true.
Take your parents shopping if they'll take you shopping and be like, hey, okay, I want to look like a professional. And they'll probably be pretty happy about that.
That's true.
Like, oh, my baby's growing up.
I know, it's true. And actually, one of the most popular posts that we have on one of our websites is about what bag to take to law school. Like,
oh yeah, well, this is a perennial topic. Like, do you want to be the person with a wheelie bag?
Yeah, I don't know. I just came from the chiropractor, so maybe.
No, I was gonna say honestly, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I could never bring myself to do it, but if you are wheeling, because I mean, this is sort of like the high school thing. It's like you're probably going to have a locker and you're going to be wheeling around these, you're going to be carrying these massive textbooks around. It actually gets really heavy.
It does.
I mean, add in a laptop, like maybe a couple of textbooks, a notepad, food, water. I mean, some gym clothes or whatever. Like you're carrying a ton of stuff around. So you got to really think through, like, how am I actually going to carry this?
It's true. And if you don't drive, especially if you take public transit or you're walking, I think it's really important to consider all of this stuff. And I carried so much junk around with me in law school. It was really unreal.
See, my apartment was only a block away, so I'd actually go back between classes just because I didn't want to carry too many books.
Yeah, I did drive to school only because this goes to the researching about the location. I had to take 2 buses to get there, which... Not happening in San Francisco. And I had to walk up a gigantic hill, and I didn't fully appreciate the amount of junk. And the walk was wonderful as long as I didn't carry anything with me. So I ended up driving and paying a lot of parking tickets.
Yeah, well, you do what you got to do.
You do what you got to do. I called it the San Francisco tax. I still call it the San Francisco tax.
It is a tax. It really is. All right. Well, I think the takeaway on what to buy is that you probably don't need to go out and spend a ton of money right now. And if you do want to spend a ton of money, it's worth at least investigating things like your laptop. Like, am I really going to be able to use this? That kind of thing. Because you don't want to end up in a situation where it's a week before exams and you're struggling to borrow a laptop that actually works with ExamSoft.
Yeah. It can be really... You don't want any more drama around exams.
Speaking of drama, what else can we do this summer to avoid problems later? How about getting your relationships in order?
Oh, yes. Getting your relationships in order. My first few weeks of law school, there was a professor who used to do this lecture that became very notorious. And during the lecture, he would talk about how many relationships would break up over Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And it was really morbid and really negative, but I did have a number of friends who ended up with significant other drama that was very distracting that first year of law school, because law school is so distracting and makes you so selfish.
Yeah, I mean, mine made it until Christmas break. That was a long distance one, and we held on until Christmas break. I spent the winter break, together with this person and then dumped him the first week of January.
Very efficient.
It's just like, I mean, this sounds horrible, but honestly, like, if things are heading in a bad direction, it's better to end it now.
Yeah, I was single when I started law school. I had ended something before I decided to go to law school, and it was somewhat freeing to just worry about myself.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just like I had to talk to him every day, and it was just like, it was this. I mean, you come to visit, and then I have to take the weekend off. I mean, this sounds horrible, but it is. I mean, you really become very selfish, and it's really difficult. It's great if you can keep your relationship together with your significant other and like have that support system. But if it's not a good relationship, it's way better to be on your own.
And if it is a good relationship, I think you need to set boundaries and talk about it going into it, especially if that person doesn't have any point of reference about the law school experience. We talk about this with the bar exam a lot too. You have to set your significant others up for success. And family members too, about the workload and your availability and, the amount of time and energy you can spend on things kind of outside of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's totally fair for your significant other to say, look, I want to see you sometimes. Like, we need to plan this in our schedule every week. But they have to be realistic too, that, that might mean half a day or one day on the weekend. It probably doesn't mean the entire weekend plus every night. Mm-hmm. And it can be really hard. I mean, particularly if you have kids or even pets, not to equate the two, but, but like, who's going to take care of these people and things like, animals when you're not there? Mm-hmm. These are things that you really have to think carefully about. Boundaries with everybody, with your parents or whoever. It's not even too early to start thinking about Thanksgiving holiday, because Thanksgiving, is one of those times where everything tends to blow up. It's right before exams. You're tired. You're really stressed out. And suddenly your parents are like, oh yeah, why don't you fly across the country for our traditional Thanksgiving dinner and spend the 4 days, around that time here? Like, what do you mean you can't come for Thanksgiving? Like, how, we need you to be there. You're part of the family. Like, yeah, better to deal with that now.
Yeah, it's very true, especially if you can't like drive. I was lucky that I could just drive home for a few days and come back. But if you're flying long distances and dealing with time change, and then you could get sick from the plane and the weather delays, and it can be really complicated. It's good to set those expectations early.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, is never fun, but better to do it now.
No, and I think what you said about, kids, partners, pets, and if you help out with your family or a family business, or you help out with a grandparent, or any of these things that these relationships that involve somebody or something relying on you, I think it's very important that you pull in your village and make sure, absolutely, that you ask for help and you come up with a solution that's going to work for everybody. Because the reality is you're just not going to be as available if you want to dedicate yourself to law school as much as you probably do going into it.
Yeah, and I think you can find those networks in law school or outside of law school. I mean, if you have a kid, presumably there often like parents in law school type of groups, and like maybe you can trade off babysitting, where like one of you takes 5 kids to the park or whatever, right? And, the other 4 people get to study for the afternoon. But yeah, I think you've got to start asking for help.
Yeah, for sure. I also think it's important though not to lose your out of law school network, because absolutely, I was lucky that I had friends in the city I was going to law school in, and I really liked hanging out with them because they weren't crazy.
Yeah, and they didn't actually care about whatever you were learning in torts. Exactly. They were like, could you please stop talking about this? Like, I don't care. Yeah. This is not actually important to anyone but you.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and you got to spend some time with them over the summer so that they'll actually talk to you and you become a really boring law student.
Exactly. Like, do something fun. Take that vacation with some friends.
Exactly.
What about leaving a job? I know we were both just talking about how you and I both finished up jobs right before law school. I think if at all possible, you want to leave on good terms, because these people will still be references for you.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, you're going to have to put this on the bar application probably. Yeah. Word of warning, they make you list everything about all of your jobs. So this is actually a good example of when you might want to go ahead and make a list of like, who is your supervisor? How do you contact that person? What is the phone number of like the company main office that you work for? because you're going to need this 3 or 4 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you want to be, you want to try to leave on good terms. You might need a reference. If nothing else, you want to like confirm. They need to confirm the dates that you worked there, probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, you ideally don't want to leave in like a blaze of glory, like burning your bridges.
Yeah, exactly. So what about, I don't know, can we shift to some academic stuff? Because that's one of the things you talked about in the beginning.
Absolutely. There's one, just want to make one other point about something you might consider doing over the summer that can be helpful. And that's just getting rid of a lot of these like nagging appointments that you need to do. Things like eye doctor, regular doctor, dentist, any of these things that you need to do like every 6 months or so. Just go ahead and do them now. Like you don't want to be dealing with finding a new doctor or an eye doctor or whatever. So that's just one thing, like definitely put on your calendar, schedule all those appointments over the summer. But yeah, now I think we can move about academics.
Especially if your health insurance might change. You may want to...
Excellent point. Because you're probably going to have crappier health insurance if you're employed now and you're going to be a student.
Yeah. So yeah, use all of those resources, that health savings account, or is that what it's called? The HS?
Yeah, the HSA or the FSA if you're working, I think it is.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, good to think about. Okay. So academics. There's a huge market of stuff out there for people getting ready for law school. So I guess we can just talk through what some of the options are. I mean, there are definitely a lot of books.
Yeah,
do you think books are worth reading?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to understand what you're getting into. To be honest, I mean, I've read basically all of the books out there. When I was thinking about writing a book myself, I can't say that I absolutely like swear by any of them, but I think some of them are very good. I think even though it's a little out of date, I think Law School Confidential is still pretty good for just the kind of overview. If you're at a top school, if not, you might be offended by it. Yeah, one of our friends, let's see, what was that one called? Hold on. I can't remember. We'll find it. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of newer ones that have come out. I think this is one of the things where you can kind of go to Amazon and just sort of search and see what other people are finding helpful. I mean, there's the whole genre of like the Planet Law School books, which is the, like, you should just not pay attention in class and just read supplements. Interesting point of view. You might consider, borrowing it from the library.
Right.
I mean, if you go to a public library, they will have an entire section of books that are sort of like how to do law school. I would recommend just going to your public library and like flipping through those books and checking some of them out. I don't think you need to own most of them. But.
And that's true. And I think it's very important to walk that line between getting some information and then, getting fearful or really intimidated by this process. Because I do think some of the books can be anxiety inducing for some folks,
Yeah, I mean, some of them are just frankly crazy.
Yeah. And so it's good
to
just flip through them. And if it's not jiving with what you feel like is going to be how you want to approach law school, then lay the book down and move on.
And the same thing with movies. People want to watch all these movies about law school. Some of them, again, depending on your personality, you might love The Paper Chase or you might find it terrifying. I think I watched with my roommates, like right before exams, watched about 10 minutes of it. And we're like, both, everybody's having an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
Like, maybe we should turn this off.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the same thing. I read 1L and The Paper Chase the summer before law school, and it is anxiety inducing.
I really liked 1L, actually.
I did like it, but
yeah.
I found it anxiety inducing a little bit.
It is, but also 1L is like a book from the 70s about like the law school experience, at Harvard or Yale or wherever it was.
So it's Paper Chase, right?
Yeah. So, these are like, take them with a grain of salt. I mean, they're interesting, like cultural artifacts, and some of it's probably relevant, but, you got to take it with a grain of salt.
My contracts professor wrote The Paper Chase.
I know. So, you told me that.
Yeah. Which he was nothing like any of the characters in the book or the professors in the book, but we always just find that funny.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has their opinion, and like there are lots of professors who've written like really specific books on things like how to read cases and stuff like that, which, if you've never read a case, it might be useful to sort of sit down and look through those. But, like if you pick up Getting to Maybe, for example, and try to read that before you've ever set foot in a law school classroom. Like, even at the end of my 1L year, that book was totally confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now I think it has some useful advice, like, years later, but just people get really overwhelmed with, like, oh my God, I don't understand this book. It's like, I'm going to flunk out before I've even shown up. And I just don't think that's helpful.
Yeah, I think so. I did do a law-related movie marathon kind of summer, though. I did, like, Oh gosh, which I was like Aaron Brockovich, and the other one, is it Michael Connolly? What's the one with?
Oh, Michael Clayton.
Michael Clayton.
Something. That's actually, I like that movie.
I did too. So,
and the one with Elle Woods, love that one.
Oh yeah, Legally Blonde. And then there's the John Travolta one about the toxic.
There are a bunch of John Grisham novels that have been made into books, like The Firm, or other ones.
So this can be kind of fun, just to kind of get in the zone, but realize that they're for fun and nothing else.
Yeah, like it's like watching, your friends once you go to law school, be like, oh, do you watch like, The Good Wife or Suits or whatever? Like, is it realistic? You're like, no. Who goes to trial in a week? Like, come on. Like, are you joking?
Yeah, I know. I enjoy Suits, but wow, is that completely unrealistic?
Yeah, I just stopped watching The Good Wife because it just drove me so nuts. So they're like, yeah, we have a new client. We're going to trial in a week. And right. I was like, oh, God, I want to kill myself. Like, this is putting such a bad image of like people's heads of what lawyers really do.
Yeah. And then, of course, there are pre-law programs, right? These are courses you can take over the summer that can help you get ready for law school. So we probably have to have a disclaimer that we have one of these.
Yes, we do indeed have one of these courses. We will not promise you that it will get you straight A's, unlike some other courses. But yeah, we run a program called Start Law School Right. We happen to think it's actually a very useful introduction to law school. It gives you some videos, and then you actually do assignments and get feedback on them, which is sort of the way that we think it's best to kind of prepare for school, is actually get to try something and then get feedback on it. So if you're interested, you can check that out. We'll put it in the show notes. We also have a free webinar series that we're running, kind of like the podcast, but a little more focused for pre-laws, that you can sign up for free. I will put that in there too. There are other courses. There's Law Preview, for example, where you can go and sit on campus for a week, if that appeals to you.
Isn't Lose another one? Am I saying it right?
Oh, yeah, Lose. I forgot about Lose. Yeah, So Lose is kind of do they still sell CDs, or is it downloadable now?
The last time I checked it was CDs, but that doesn't mean anything.
So they have like in-person seminars and also some sort of like pre-prepared component, whether it's downloads at this point or CDs, strategies. Again, like all of these are potentially useful for certain people. I would say talk to people, who've done it if you can. But they're not going to kill you probably. They might be a waste of money. They might not be. But you don't have to do this stuff. It could just be helpful.
Yeah. And again, I think it's what kind of a person you are. I think if you think going through a program will reduce your anxiety and make you feel more in control going into school, then it could be a very good use of your time. But like most things in the legal education related world, in the bar prep world, there's a variety of options at a variety of price points.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be very critical of whether or not a given tool at a given price point is going to give you that amount of value. So
yeah, because obviously, people are like, oh yeah, this will change your life. It'll make you a straight A student. And the reality is that's not going to happen.
Right.
If you're going to be a straight A student, you're probably going to be a straight A student anyway. And if you're not, you're not. And we're talking about like shifting confidence and also shifting a little bit. Like it's probably, if you're not willing to put in the work to be a straight A student, going to a program is not going to make you a straight A student.
Yep, I agree.
That's just the reality of it. There's nothing anyone can tell you in a week or a month or whatever that's going to magically transform you into the perfect law student. Like you have to do the work.
Agreed. What about like case books and supplements?
Well, some people are like, should I buy the case books and start reading? Answer, no.
No.
Please like, do not do that. That is stupid. You don't know what you're going to be assigned. Like, you have no idea. That is a complete, if we can say one thing for sure, we can say buying your case books and doing the reading now is a total waste of time.
Yep.
Supplements, on the other hand, I think like maybe it can't hurt to have like an overview of a class, but it's totally unnecessary.
And you just don't have enough information about what your professor is going to cover. I think,
exactly.
you pick up a supplement on civil procedure, one of our favorites being Examples and Explanations by Professor Glannon. And you could read that cover to cover, but your professor may cover 45% of that book in your class.
If you find it inherently interesting and like you want to read it, great, but it's totally not necessary.
Yeah.
I think your time would actually be better spent picking up a really difficult book and reading that. Like start reading The Russians or something over the summer. Because you're going to be doing a lot of hard reading. And, most people probably haven't really sat down and read for 3 or 4 hours a day, like dense materials. Pick your favorite philosopher, like, I don't care, read Foucault, whatever it is. But, something that's like really difficult.
Yep.
And sit down and read it for 3 or 4 hours every day and see how that goes.
Yep. That's a really good advice, because I think it is a hard shift to train yourself to sit down and read for long periods of time.
Yeah, that's, I think, for most people, the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenges of starting law school is just like the time commitment. So dense reading is not something that people are used to. So what about your legal career? I mean, should you start worrying about that now?
Well,
I don't think people need to start worrying. I don't think they need to start worrying about anything. But I think you can start planning and thinking about it. This last summer before law school is a great opportunity to do some informational interviews with lawyers. We can link. I have on the Girls Guide a very detailed guide to informational interviews that you might want to check out. But, think about it. This is a great time to send an email to some people being like, hey, I'm getting ready to start law school. I'm really interested in the area you're practicing in. Could I take you to coffee?
Yeah.
And also just sort of think through like what you want out of law school, because once you get there, a lot of other people are going to be telling you what you should want. And if that's not what you actually think you want, then, you need to get clear about what it is that you're looking for.
Right. Exactly. So I think the more you can network and begin to build your community, that's great. But don't go spend all your time thinking, I have to meet every lawyer that I can.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, this summer, everything you do, you should approach with like a relaxed viewpoint. None of this is going to make or break you. These are just things that, well, except maybe not having a place to live, that could make or break you.
That's true.
But as long as this is why we talked about the life stuff first, because it's actually a lot more important. You can figure the other stuff out later.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I think, if you can, if it's feasible, take some time and take a vacation and relax, because you're going to be working really hard. And if you go in already stressed out, it's just probably not going to go that well.
Agreed.
I don't think I did that. I was crazy. I was just like, I'm going to work up until like the day before I leave, and then I'll just like pack my entire house, fly across the country, and everything will be great. Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah, I was a little more realistic and gave myself a little bit more cushion, but...
Well, I've never been one who's great at, being realistic about things like that.
You always pack like minutes before you have to leave for the airport.
I know. It's really true. Well, I've actually started packing the night before, and I've realized the reason I was always so stressed out in the morning is because it literally takes me like 3 hours to pack. Mm-hmm. And I always allocated like maybe an hour. So, of course, I was always really stressed out in the morning because I needed 3 times that much time.
Yeah.
So just be realistic. Start earlier than you think you need to with this life stuff, because that is the kind of thing that can just set you really on the wrong path and like ruin your experience from day one. And that's just not a great place to be in.
Yeah. All right. Well, we hope this list has helped you start to frame all that you needed to do over the summer. But make sure that you do something fun and, put your feet up and relax, because you're going to be plenty busy come the fall. And
absolutely.
With that, we are out of time. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. We usually release episodes on Mondays. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com. Or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.